Hey guys, welcome to our SoulFam Podcast, where I interview space holders from all over the world. I'm your host. My name is Karolina, and I'm the manifestation mentor. Today on the show, we have Julia Armour, the mindset and anxiety coach. Welcome to the show, Julia. How are you doing?
Hi, I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
I am very excited to have you here as well because the topics that we're going to touch upon today are very much aligned with me and all the things that I'm about in my life. So let's dive straight in and start with the first prompt that I prepared for this conversation because you're an anxiety coach. So I would love to talk about anxiety versus change. Like, how does change affect our state, and what happens when people get anxious and they really have this emotional reaction, and how to also resolve it, because many people actually struggle with it. So yeah, I'm curious about your perspective on this topic.
Yeah, the interesting thing is that we are kind of programmed to sort of be weary and afraid of change. Just, from our archaic programming thousands of years ago, anything that was outside of the known was deemed to be dangerous and unsafe. So that's kind of how our minds were programmed. And over the years, even though our lives have become a lot more safe in general, we still have this programming that we have been dealt, and it's something that we have to be conscious of and actively make change towards changing. And it's really interesting, the connection between struggling with anxiety and having a fear of change, because it's something where people who struggle with anxiety feel like they don't have a lot of control over a lot of the areas of their life. They feel like anxiety controls how they feel, what they do, how they show up in their life. So one of the tactics and the coping mechanisms that people with anxiety use is really having a strong grip on the things that they feel like they do have some control of over in their life. So then that kind of, transcends the um, the idea that people are afraid of change. And then when you have anxiety, it's even harder to deal with change because you kind of associate change with negative things, especially if you're someone who struggles with your mental health. One day you could have had decent mental health, and then maybe a traumatic experience happened and something caused you to develop anxiety or depression or whatever that is. And that even feeds that subconscious belief that change is a bad thing, because one moment you felt okay and you felt safe in your life, and then something changed, and then you you felt unsafe in your life. And anxiety, depression, whatever that mental health was, became your normal, right? So it's something that when you're dealing with any sort of mental health issue, addressing this subconscious fear of change that we all have, but people with mental health have even deeper, is something that's really important to address, because change is really the catalyst for growth. And when you really think about it, if you want to change your life in any sort of way, if you want to stop feeling as anxious, if you want to deal with your mental health and improve your life in whatever way you want to improve it, that really inherently means that you have to be okay with change, and you have to embrace change, because change is going to bring you that change of state in your mind, in your body, in your life, right? So that's why it's such an important thing to really address when you have mental health struggles. You need to be able to find some sort of sense of safety with change. And this is something that, takes time. It's something that I dealt with on my personal development journey when I was in a place where my anxiety had gotten to the worst it had ever been. It actually was affecting not only my mental health, but it was affecting my physical health and my body. And it was really miserable just waking up every day not feeling well. So one day when I came across the concept of mindset work and personal development, it kind of opened my eyes to this whole other way of being. And I had to right away address that fear of change, because everything in my mind, my subconscious belief about change being bad and scary and unsafe was all triggering off in my mind, right? So I had to kind of um, address that right at the beginning of my journey, because your personal development journey can't start unless you're going to address this inner fear of change. So that's something I really had to address right away. And it could be really hard to do, right? Like it's triggering, it's scary, it's uncomfortable. And where I was at the time, what I really had to do was sort of reason with myself to make myself feel okay with starting to try to do something different in my life and let go of those old patterns that I had. And the one question that I actually asked myself was, how much worse can things get? Like, really, how much worse can they get? I feel miserable every day. My mind is always racing with anxious thoughts. My physical body is ill and I don't feel well at all. I can't eat anything without feeling okay. So I was kind of in that place where it's like, the lowest of the lows. So I had to reason with myself and get myself to that place of being okay with trying something new by just really starting with that kind of, you could call it a low vibration thought, but just how much worse can things get, right? And that's not the most optimistic thought, but it was the thought that was the catalyst to me actually plucking up some inner courage inside of me and start doing things different in my life. So something I tell anybody is that wherever you are at right now is perfect, and you just have to meet yourself where you're at. There's no prerequisites for this inner work. There's no prerequisites for mindset work or personal development. You just need to meet yourself where you're at and show yourself some grace, because when you do that, whatever you need to do to get yourself started doing this work and going on that journey, you'll find, what I found is a few weeks into doing this work and staying really dedicated and motivated, and I started seeing positive results from it. I personally noticed one of my first mind shifts that I had was from that place of how much worse can it get to how much better can things actually get? Because I started, witnessing those positive shifts that were happening within me. And it was sort of like a dopamine hit, like, wow, I'm actually starting to improve my life. I'm starting to feel better. Every day things are gradually getting better. And then, you start to witness your personal growth and you start to feel better. And that sort of becomes your motivation to keep things going. So for me, as soon as I started doing mindset and personal development work, I got so hooked on it. And within 6 months of being really consistent and just committing to myself and committing to the process and going through the healing, even when times were hard, within 6 months, I was able to completely heal from this chronic anxiety that I had struggled with for 15 years of my life. It was something that was so much a part of who I was, and I was completely able to just eradicate it from my life and heal from it. And that's what inspired me to become a mindset and anxiety coach, because I know from firsthand experience just how powerful this work is.
Wow, this is such an amazing story. Thank you so much for sharing. I love so many things that you said. And first thing that I had in mind when you were talking about change, that people are scared of change because people are scared of unknown. But actually, it's not like we're scared of unknown. We are scared of our projection of what unknown can be. It's like you say, we associate change with something like bad, with something scary, with something unsafe, but it doesn't need to be like that. Or even sometimes when we change for the worse, actually, big picture, when you see it in like few years, you see, oh my god, actually this thing happened because I needed to go through this experience so that then I meet this person,
Yes.
or I land there, or I start a new career, or I whatever, right? So even these bad things, quote unquote, that make us feel unsafe or anxious or whatever, sometimes they are there for a reason. I mean, always they are there for a reason, in my view.
Yes.
When you just zoom out and when you see it from a different perspective, right, over time. But it's such an amazing story that you were able to get out of it in 6 months. I feel like it's very empowering for people to know that when you do the work and when you actually dive into your anxiety and you process it and you work with it and you probably have different tools and methods to deal with it, which I would love to talk about, but it is possible to heal, right? Because some people are just there, they are like diagnosed with something, anxiety or depression or whatever it is, and it's like a label that is stuck to them. But people like you
Yes.
are an example that you can get out of it and be fine. And of course, you're not going to heal all the traumas of your entire life in 6 months, but if you can get yourself to feel better and not have like a chronic condition, then amazing. Because I think like chronic conditions require chronic healing as well, right? Like if you have had something for
Yeah.
years, then you're probably gonna have to put some years also to get out of it. But still, the results can be exponential, I believe. At least that's what I see in my healing and in my clients' healing as well. So it's a wonderful story, and I would love you to share some tools that you used for yourself that have helped you get out of it and supported you on your journey the most.
Yeah. And one thing I just wanted to comment on what you were saying about how you see, struggles, and you see that as something that's supposed to happen on your journey, right? And something I just wanted to touch on that is that that's how we see things as people that know all about this stuff, right? Know about personal development and know about having a growth mindset. But when you're in the midst of mental health and struggle, it's really hard to see things that way at the beginning. So I totally empathize with people who are in that place and who are in the place that I was. Is just that, it's, you just have to make small little gradual steps at the beginning and just kind of work on things slowly and start to slowly trust yourself. And like I said, this first thing of really trying to tackle this fear of change is one of the first steps that I had to take. And something that I did at the time was I evaluated what different patterns and routines I had in my life. And I started to think, how can I do some of the things I do in my everyday life a little bit differently, and kind of prove to myself that when I do something in a different way, that it's not going to be super tragic and really scary, right? Like trying to prove to yourself, because your mind believes what you tell it. So my new step moving forward, my new belief I wanted to instill in myself was that change could be a positive thing. So I was looking at what I did every day and trying to figure out how I could change things in a positive way to prove to myself that change is a good thing. So at the time, I was actually working in an office, like a regular office space. It was during the pandemic, which was already a very stressful time. I was essentially running the company by myself. I didn't have any employees because of COVID and trying to, keep costs down and everything. So there was a lot of pressure on me as the employee of this company. And I remember one of the things I had to do every day was drive into the office. And it was about a 10-minute drive, 10 to 12-minute drive into the office. And I looked at my commute and I thought, maybe there's a different way I can commute to work. And maybe this is like a small little step I could take for myself to try and show myself that doing something different in my routine can actually be a good thing. So I started taking a different way to work that was actually a more scenic route. It maybe took me an extra 2 to 3 minutes to get to work, but it was a really pretty drive with tree-lined roads. And when the sun was out and the skies were blue, it was a really nice drive. So I started doing that every day. And that was like one little way I started showing myself that I could actually do something different in my normal routine, and it actually ends up being a positive experience for myself. So I started doing that after some time, started incorporating different elements into it, like playing some of my favorite music and just really making it a vibe, like just making going to work be a good thing. And at the beginning, even though work was a really stressful thing for me, I could at least rely on the fact that that drive was a positive part of my day, right? Like that was something I consciously chose to do for myself that was switching up my routine, that was making me feel good. And then from there, just kind of adding more layers and trying to find more ways that I could do things differently in my regular routine. And over time and with consistency, it started changing that mindset for myself. And I started shifting my mindset on the idea of change being a scary thing, that it's actually a positive thing. So that was one of the things I did right at the very beginning.
Wow, that's amazing. I love that, because sometimes when we try to do big change, it's not going to work because it's not going to be as anchored and integrated within us. Whereas if we take little steps towards where we want to be, we actually can sink into it more, right? It's kind of like with affirmations. So when we want to manifest something and we want to say something to ourselves, if we really don't love ourselves and we straight away try to say, oh, I love myself so much, it's just going to bring more resistance in our body and more push away feeling, rather than actually anchoring this perspective within us. But if we tell ourselves, oh, I love my eyes, or I love how kind I am, or I love something that is like that we can really believe, and it's like a smaller step towards self-love, then it's easier for us to integrate it and to actually really believe it and not to have internal resistance to it. So I guess it's a similar principle here. So I love that. I love what you shared. And actually, like, I have a personality in the typology of Enneagram. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it, but there is a typology called Enneagram. And in this typology, my personality is supposed to be the most anxious personality of all of them. So anxiety is something that I'm really familiar with. And yeah, it's pretty interesting, because I also have a part of me that is an enthusiast. So enthusiast is just like brushing everything under the carpet, not really looking at any like shitty emotions or whatever. So my personality is a mix. But I actually see that in my life, life, anxiety has been a big theme. And of course, in my case, it stems from abandonment wound and my dad not being there in my childhood and my whole safety being interrupted. And then, like lack of trust to the world or to the universe to be taken care of and so on. So I can see where it stems from. But from this perspective, I just want to share that we're talking now about the tools and how to resolve it. For me, I feel slowing down and slowing my breath is a way to really not even cope with it, but actually really to regulate myself to be calm. Because with anxiety, it's like we are on big like engine, like our engine goes so fast, right? Because oh my god, what's
Yeah.
happening? Oh, no, oh no, and all these thoughts, right? So when the moment we are in this loop, it's so hard to really stop it when we are so fast. But if we can slow
Yeah.
down our breathing, which then slows down our thinking, which then slows down our body and our nervous system, and we can really get ourselves to just focus on the breath. For me, it's been one of the simplest but also most powerful tools to bring myself to my essence, to bring myself to my truth, to bring myself to the centeredness of my being in general. And it's, like some people could be like, that's so cliche, like breath work, come on, everyone talks about it. But 3 minutes can completely change your state, in my perspective, right? I mean, I'm not sure how it is with
Yeah.
chronic anxiety, because like I've never had chronic anxiety. It's more like a trauma here and there, classic childhood stuff. But what do you think when it comes to chronic anxiety? Would breathing help as well with this kind of issue?
Oh yeah, totally. Breathwork was one of the second tools I probably tapped into. And again, I started doing it on my drive to work. I kind of set a schedule for myself that um, a few times a day I would just tune into myself and my breath and just kind of see where I'm at. And I just started consciously thinking about how I was breathing. And I found that, I was breathing more rapidly as an anxious person. That's just something that starts happening on a subconscious level that you don't really realize until you start to tune into it and recognize it. So, breathing is definitely something that I recommend as well. And it's something that's so easy that you could just do no matter what circumstance you're in. So, some people that I've worked with, they talk about how they feel really anxious when they're out in public, like at a restaurant or something, or they're shopping in a busy mall and there's so many people and all these sensory things going on and it triggers their anxiety. And breath work is one of those tools that you can just do very discreetly and people don't even need to know that you're doing it, right? So that makes it a great tool in itself, just having something in your back pocket that you can pull out when you need it. And it's very easy to do once you learn, what kind of breath work you like to do, which ones make you feel good. And you can just do it whenever you want to kind of bring that calm and ease back to your body. And I definitely think it's really effective as well.
Amazing. And you don't need to be like a breathwork facilitator. You can just literally count your breath. You can do
Yeah.
square breathing, like, count to 5 for in breath, stop on 5 on the in breath, and then breathe out for 5, and then stop on the out breath. And even the
Yes.
square breathing can already just center your energy and be way more peaceful. You can be way more peaceful after that. That's amazing. Do you have any other tools that have helped you on your journey?
Yeah. One thing I want to say about breath work too is just when I first started doing it, I actually got really, really triggered. Like just speaking, it kind of leans into the whole fear of change thing too, right? Like I was actively trying to change how I was breathing, and I would get like these little flutters of like, panic and stuff because it's like, oh, you're breathing differently. Like, this is scary.
Mhm.
So that's something I dealt with at the beginning too. So that's something that could come up for anybody who's interested in working on breath work and just maybe are a little afraid of, some of the sensations you might have. I know for me, it was just, yeah, it was triggering at the beginning, but I think just like anything, any change you make in your life, it's not always going to feel comfortable, but you really, the longer you stick with it and the more you find ways to self-soothe yourself through it, the easier it becomes. And once you do something enough, it turns into a pattern and then a habit and then just part of the way that you function, part of your life, right? So
Yeah,
just,
and it's pretty
yeah,
much
word of
never
advice is just
comfortable.
yeah, it's never comfortable, and that's the thing, like, even just the feeling of feeling uncomfortable and change, they're so integrated, right? Which is why it's something that I really am passionate on speaking on because it's really an important part of any sort of healing or personal growth that you want to do. You have to really be in tune with that feeling of knowing that you're going to feel uncomfortable, but that it's going to be okay. And another tool that I definitely used was affirmations. And I even had a specific affirmation for when I felt uncomfortable and when I wasn't feeling safe. And I'm trying to remember it off the top of my head, but I think it was, I approach uncomfortable feelings with grace, understanding, and acceptance. And that's just something that I would say to myself whenever I felt my nervous system kind of overreacting to something. And I would just reassure myself that, yes, these things feel scary in the moment and they feel uncomfortable, but you're doing this for a greater purpose. And the more you keep doing this, the better it's going to feel. So just kind of like coaching yourself to just sort of stick it out and just keep going, because it's going to get better. And yeah, affirmations are a great thing to do as well when you're kind of wanting to, rewrite some of those narratives in your mind, and anything that you do with repetition and from an open heart space, and just, anything you could do to allow yourself to just trust yourself more. Cultivating trust within your own body and your own mind is such a big part of healing as well.
Beautiful. I love everything that you shared. Yeah, affirmations can be very, very powerful. But again, I would really suggest to choose the ones that are landing, that are really resonating with us. Because sometimes when we say some things to ourselves that don't click, it feels like we're lying to ourselves. So we're actually creating the opposite
Oh
effect. But
yeah.
yeah, for me, it's been very powerful to use affirmations as well. And I would love to touch upon this topic of anxiety, and this is like the most exciting topic for me, because like we were talking about before we started recording, that we're going to talk about adaptation and traveling and living in a new place and how this makes people anxious. Because like, to me, it's like the least uncomfortable thing ever, because I've been traveling for my whole life, really. I've been always traveling with my mom and her choir since I was, I think, 1 year old. I've been already traveling with like a group of people all over Europe. And then like maybe 11 years ago, I went to study abroad. I was traveling by myself. And then since then, I pretty much travel all the time. And I'm in the situations where I'm just on my own in a random country on the other side of the globe by myself. For example, when I went to Australia to study there, I just knew where I'm going to write my thesis, but I had no friends, no flat, no work, no nothing. And, for some people, it can be like, what the hell is this girl doing? It's like, it's so scary, right? But for me, it's just, yeah, I mean, I'm just going to handle it. I mean, it cannot be that hard. And I was just like super chill about it. So I would love to talk to you if you had maybe any experiences with your clients, and what do people struggle with when it comes to change and living in a new place, and anxiety, because I feel like a lot of people can have social anxiety or different type of anxiety when they do. And what are your maybe what's your advice for people to adapt? And then I would love to also share my perspectives and my advice, because I literally have zero anxiety about going to the random random places all over the world by
Yeah.
myself.
Well, that's great. I'm glad that you don't struggle with that. That's a really good thing. I think kind of it sort of circles back to what we were talking about earlier, just the fact that any sort of big significant change can just be very triggering for somebody with anxiety, because we do, form those coping mechanisms and these like false realities of safety by trying to hyper control and hyper manage the things that we believe that we have control over. And for a lot of people, that can be where you live, right? Like people get very attached to their homes. There's tons of people that have anxiety about even leaving their house, right? Like they can't even leave their house without feeling super anxious, or feeling like they left the oven on, or something like tragic, like they have these catastrophic thoughts about leaving their homes. So it really comes down to just having a feeling of unsafety within yourself and within your body and within your mind. And that translates to really everything that you do, like not even just moving, but like I used to have anxiety over just going out for dinner, because I didn't know if I would have like a flare up of symptoms, or I didn't know what would
Mhm.
happen. Like I wasn't able to control that environment in my mind, right? So, and I wasn't able to control how I felt at the time. It's like whatever's going to happen, it's just going to happen, and I'm going to be a victim, right? And that's how I used to feel. And I think what sort of inspired this conversation was the fact that I recently moved across the country, or not across country, to another country. So I used to live in Canada in the Toronto area, and I just moved to Colorado in the States. And for me, I've just done a lot of introspective thinking about it, and the fact that, I've found this to be such a positive experience, but I know the version of me like 3 or 4 years ago would have just been absolutely terrified at the thought of completely uprooting my life and leaving everything I knew and leaving my family and all these things. And I've just been able to really think about, just how much personal growth has happened in that time, right? And that's what kind of inspired me to want to talk about, this fear of change that really is ingrained in a lot of us, but especially for people who struggle with their mental health. And yeah, it's really just about making those small changes. And, sometimes you can't control where you live if you have to relocate. But I think what's really effective is just having some tools and some practices and some routines that are healthy, that are not, unhealthy coping mechanisms, things that are healthy and good for you, that you feel good doing, that you can bring with you anywhere. Because really what I do, I'm all about, like, I'm all for, external things helping people, like therapy or supplements, all those external things. But I'm really focused and really excited about empowering people about the power that they have within themselves to create the positive change in their life, to regulate their own nervous system, like really inner sourcing instead of outsourcing. So
Mhm.
the more that you can build that wellness toolkit and the more resources you can have that work for yourself to help you feel safe, to help you feel grounded, to help you feel good, that's really something you could take anywhere. That's not something that's reliant on a certain location or a resource from a certain person or a certain company. That's all from within yourself. So if you have that toolkit and you have those resources, you can, the way I see it, you can really handle anything that life throws your way.
Absolutely. And yeah, it is so interesting because I also feel that anxiety is not our enemy. And like when you were speaking, I just had this thought that we need to treat anxiety also as an indicator. Because, for example, if you need to adapt to a new environment, you better have at least a little bit of anxiety in terms of just keeping you safe, a little bit of fear to not put yourself in the situation that are actually dangerous, right? Because fear is only there to keep us safe. So, for example, if I go to a different country, like, for example, if I ever go to Africa, I'm probably going to make a lot of research. And this anxiety can be my drive to um, just put myself only in safe situations and in safe places, and maybe not go by myself to some places, or maybe just to, using this energy of a part of us that is anxious, utilizing it for ourselves rather than making it something that is wrong and bad, because everyone has anxiety and it's our survival instinct in a way. Anxiety, fear, all these things, right? So if we make it an enemy and we constantly want to resist it and not make it our friend who just shows us the way in some ways, then also it can cause more damage than good. I just had this thought. I'm curious to know
Yeah.
what you think about it.
Yeah, for sure. It could definitely be productive, right? Like you said, it's part of our functioning of our normal body, right? Like if something's potentially going to be dangerous for us, it's okay to feel a little bit anxious. It's just about being able to mitigate that anxiety and work through it and not let it get to an anxious or a chronic state where, your whole nervous system is dysregulated and it can't properly depict what's safe and what's not safe. Like that's really what causes like chronic anxiety. It's just having such a dysregulated nervous system that your body and mind can't actually depict what is a safe situation and what isn't. But when you're healthy and you know how to, self-soothe yourself, you know how to balance your nervous system, and then you experience anxiety from time to time, that's definitely just a normal part of our functioning. And that is good. It's information from our body, right? It's some sort of warning about something, and we just need to be able to, understand when the thoughts that are happening in our minds are actually productive and when they are just, chronically negative or pestering and they're not really productive, right? And it's about being able to distinguish between those two voices, like the one that's actually good for you coming from a good place and the one that's catastrophing ideas and, making you feel worse than you should, right? So yeah, it's
Mm.
definitely productive. It's a good thing to feel anxious sometimes. And for me, like I say that I'm anxiety free, I've overcome anxiety, I went through anxiety recovery, but for me that doesn't mean I'm never going to feel anxious again, because that's a
Mhm.
normal part of our human functioning. But it just means that I was able to get myself out of a completely dysregulated state so that I only feel anxiety when it is justified anxiety.
Absolutely. And it is useful for us. And did you have, while you were moving, did you have any anxiety about the new place at all? Because I would love to touch upon all these things that people feel insecure about when they are moving the place. And I would just like to present an opposite perspective, because I feel like to everything that people say, like, oh, it's going to be so dangerous, I can be like, yeah, but doesn't have to.
Yeah, actually, I felt really good about the move. The only thing that was kind of on my mind, I guess there's a couple things. So one of them just being that I was coming from a country that has free healthcare to a country that does not have free healthcare. So that was kind of
Mhm.
a consideration in my mind, right? Like if I ever hurt myself here or if something happened, like that would be a financial burden potentially for me. So just understanding that, that is a potential fear or concern that I had, and I was still able to move forward despite that concern. Another thing, because I moved to Colorado and we're living in the mountains, there's a lot more wildlife here, and it's not uncommon to go out to your yard and potentially see a bear, right? Like that is a reality here. So that's something that I've also had to like come to terms with and be able to understand as a potential threat. But, just kind of you can self-soothe yourself and research, the likelihood of this actually happening. And if you're, keeping your house clean and you're keeping the garbage out of the way, like the likelihood of a bear coming to you is not very likely, but it's still a potential threat, right? So it's something that
Mhm.
can potentially come up for me that I would have to work through, right? Um, but yeah, the move itself, I just feel like it was a very aligned move for me personally, and it's just been a very positive thing for me, to be honest. So
Mm.
yeah, not too many
Amazing.
worries, just, yeah.
That's amazing. And as you mentioned, like you can always do the research and like statistics, because sometimes I feel like this anxiety comes from media, like from TV, like, oh, don't go there and there because
Yes.
so many people die because of that. And then you count the statistic, like statistically, how many people died out of this. And you're like, that's 0.0001%, and people are
Right.
just like talking about it as if there is something big going on, but it's actually not. And I feel like that's why watching television, I don't think it's a good idea for people with anxiety, because that can even
Yes, and
input
the news.
even
Stay away from
yeah,
the
the
news.
news, everything is just like, yeah, I do not recommend. I mean, I haven't watched TV in ages, I don't even know. But yeah, with this
Yeah.
adaptation, I would love to talk about it a little more, because I feel like a lot of people also struggle with like meeting new people and like social anxiety, and also with the
Oh,
fact,
yeah.
especially if you live like me, if you live like a nomad where you change the place pretty much like all the time, if you're not in a place for more than 2 weeks at a time, because sometimes this happens for me. Sometimes I manage to
Yeah.
be in one place for like a month, but that's like big then for me. It's like, okay, I'm gonna be there for like
Okay.
1 month, live in this place, right? But usually I just travel around, like, I have some base somewhere, but I just travel. Then it could be like anxiety can come from, okay, I'm gonna need to form new connections, I'm gonna need to talk to people. And also I think it might come from being able to let go of people as well, because like as you said, when you were moving, it's like, okay, I leave my friends, I leave my family, I need to rebuild everything. But it doesn't actually have to be scary if you really accept that change is inevitable and it's always going to happen. And it's like literally you are not the same person that you were a moment ago, because maybe some thoughts
Yeah.
already came and maybe some perspectives are shifted already. So it's the only constant really that we have is the change. And if we can
Yeah.
accept this fact, and we might have to go through a lot of emotional release to be able to accept this fact, then like we are good to go. And even with people, it's like if we're triggered with some people leaving, if we can go into this trigger and release these emotions from our body, the next time that someone is going to leave or whatever, it's not going to be as emotionally charged for us, so then we're not going to be as anxious about it. And I feel like it's all about really allowing ourselves to feel how we feel and accepting where we are, as you said before, and accepting all the feelings that are coming, because then at some point you're going to expand your capacity to feel so much that it's not going to touch you. Like none of these things are going to touch you. If people leave, it's not going to touch you, because you're going to be so centered within yourself and know that you can create any change. You can find this new job, you can meet these new people, you actually can do it. But the capacity to feel like this, I feel like it's linked to the capacity of us feeling negative emotions, because the more we expand our capacity to feel it, and the more our nervous system gets to feel, okay, it's safe to feel like shit, as I say, it's
Yeah.
safe to feel uncomfortable, then we can handle pretty much anything, right? And still be reasonable, of course, not put ourselves in dangerous situation, but we don't have to have unreasonable anxiety or fears when we adapt to changes.
Yeah, exactly. That's such a huge thing. And just knowing that, change is something that's inevitable, happens to us all the time, whether that's positive or negative. That's a good mindset to adapt because it's so true, right? And And there are so many things that we have control over, that we can choose to think and we can choose to do or choose to feel. And yeah, social anxiety is a big thing for people, right? Like, people not only find safety within their own patterns and habits, but they find safety within other people. And again, it's the mindset of outsourcing your safety to others and to places and to things. And that's something that I used to struggle with when I had anxiety too, is I would make all these, kind of, it's hard to explain, but let's say I, would go to a certain location, and the last time I was at that location, or most of the time when I'm at that location, I feel safe and I have a good time, then I would associate that location with safety. And then if something at
Mm.
that location ever happened that was bad, or that, I went to that location another time and I didn't feel good, then all of a sudden my trust would be just gone in that place. And I was always looking for things outside of myself to outsource my safety in, when really, when you learn that safety comes from within and you have to cultivate your own sense of safety and security, that's a whole new ball game. But again, trying to put safety in other people and other things and other circumstances, that's all these kind of unhealthy coping mechanisms that we try to grasp at in order to find some sort of sense of safety, because our own bodies don't feel safe to us when we struggle with mental health.
Absolutely. And it's actually interesting because once we get to realize that the safety is within us, we also are a vibrational match to attract safe situations into our life. And it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? If we are anxious all the
Yes.
time and we're projecting anxiety outwards, then the universe is a mirror. So we're going to have all these situations that cause us to feel anxious. And when we cultivate safety within, suddenly there is only safety around us, because this is the energy that we radiate. So that's pretty cool. All right, Julia. So I
Yeah.
have one last little question to you. Where could people find you and get to know you more and see your content and explore what you're about, if they would like to, yeah, just connect deeper?
Yeah. So the best place to find me would be on Instagram. So it's at living my 2.0. So living my 2.0, that's kind of my philosophy with everything that I do in life now, like always striving to become the best version of myself and working towards that personal growth. So that's kind of what I called my business as a result of that. So yeah, Instagram's the best place to find me. And from there, I have all the links in my bio. I have a YouTube channel where I make videos. I have my website. I have my courses and offers available. My signature course is called Shift Your Mindset 101, and it's a self-study course that people can take online. And it's really about all of the tools and techniques and mindset work that I did during those first 6 months to find my healing. So I compiled that all into a course. So it's accessible for anybody who's anywhere. So if you want to check that out, you can find everything from my Instagram.
Amazing. Thank you so much for this whole beautiful conversation and for all the tools and wisdom that you shared with us. It's really been a pleasure to talk to you. And I really intend for this conversation to help everyone who struggles with anxiety or fear of change to move through it and to get the most out of it. So thank you so, so much.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's been so great. And I'm happy that we had this conversation.
Thank you so much, my beautiful souls, for listening to us, being with us, watching us. And if you want to learn more about what I do, you can find me on karolina.kuraj with K, and my surname is Kuraj. That's on Instagram. And you can find our podcast on Instagram too at We Are SoulFam. And if you want to learn a step-by-step process to manifest all your desires into reality, to reprogram your beliefs, to work with childhood traumas, to connect to your intuition, to align your thoughts, actions, and everything that you do with your desires and bringing your dream life into reality, contact me through Instagram or through the email at connect@soulfam.com. And I wish you a beautiful day. Thank you so much.